بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. نريد التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله عز وجل وسنة رسوله والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Firstly, a big assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to Hafsa, Mama, yourself, and Ismail and
Walaikum
Najma for
salam.
this message that they're also watching in. And everyone, all of the viewers around the world, Jazakallah khair for tuning in, inshallah, and coming here for the love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and for the sake of the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We mentioned a brief outline on Friday in regards to the purpose of Seerah and the reason why we feel so passionate about delivering the Seerah daily on this show, inshallah. But likewise, inshallah, just before we begin, a few prerequisites to mention why we study the Seerah and what is the purpose of studying the Seerah. And ultimately, whatever we do as a believer, the first and foremost point of call is that our niyyah, our intention is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That should be the only intention that we ever do anything for. Any other intention is not going to be the correct one. Our sole intention is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to earn the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه, to seek the closeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And with this beautiful niyyah, inshallah, we hope that Allah grants us that niyyah. This is solely for His pleasure. And with that niyyah, inshallah, we have many purposes also. We have the reasons, underlying reasons of why we study the seerah in order to attain that niyyah of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the first and foremost purpose of studying the seerah is, number one, the most important is to know the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is to love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because our iman can only become complete by loving the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam more than anything else in creation, more than loving him more than our own selves. That is the essence of iman, and we will never reach our goal until we love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam more than everything else in creation, everything else in our life, everything else in the world. More than everything else, we should love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the one who is the beloved of Allah, al-Mustafa, the one chosen by Allah, the elect one, chosen by Allah to be His Habib, His most beloved. And that is the reason, the first utmost reason why we study the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because to know him is to love him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And additionally, we study the seerah because, like we mentioned on Friday, by knowing him sallallahu alaihi wasallam and studying his seerah, there are three main benefits that we receive. Four main benefits that we receive. The first of which is that by knowing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know the best of creation. You know the perfect, absolute perfect benchmark of being a human being in this earth. You learn how to be like the best of creation, learn how to be the best everything you can be, the best father, the best husband, the best brother, the best son, the best friend, the best mu'min, the best Muslim, the best slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You get to learn how to be the best in all of these things, the best human being, full stop, by following and knowing the greatest of creation and the best human being to ever walk and whoever will walk the face of this earth. That is the first benefit of studying the seerah. The second benefit of studying the seerah is that the deen that the Prophet ﷺ was sent with, the deen of Allah. Within the deen of Allah, we have the Quran, we have the tafasir, the commentary of the Quran, the understanding of the Quran. We have the study of hadith. We have the study of aqidah, our aqaid, our beliefs. We have the study of fiqh, the rulings of the sharia. We have all of these different aspects of the deen that we study. And many times we might study one or the other or the other. And truly, each of these sciences, if we dedicated our life to them, we could never ever get to even a satisfactory state of doing justice to any one of these fields. But many a times, for the layman, for the common person, for myself, for those of us who aren't ulama, for those who aren't beautiful scholars that have the zeal and the have been blessed with the sincerity and acceptance to go and study these fields. For many of us, when we are studying even the basics of these fields, sometimes we struggle, and sometimes we struggle to study them. Sometimes we struggle to give the adequate amount of time, and sometimes we struggle to adapt or understand them or bring them into our life. And sometimes, because of our own emotions and our own mindsets that we have set, our own ideologies, and the way the world around us has affected us, we sometimes struggle to accept aspects of the deen when we first hear them. The beauty of studying the seerah and what makes it so unique is that when you study the seerah, you see every facet of the deen, when it's done correctly and justice is given to the study of the seerah, then it's studied in the correct detail, then you get to study every facet of the deen, every aspect of the deen, every verse of the Quran, how it was revealed, how everything panned out, the context behind the revelation of that verse, how the Prophet ﷺ received the revelation, how he ﷺ explained it, the commentary of the verse, all of the hadith that have come regarding the Messenger ﷺ, all of his sunnah, all of his practices ﷺ, everything about him ﷺ, all of the beliefs that he taught, all of the masail, the rulings and the fiqh that developed in the Sharia, where did they come from? And the entire mindset and the entire transformation that the Sahaba went through the journey that the Prophet ﷺ took them on, upon the journey that Allah had set the Prophet ﷺ upon. That is the seerah. And when you get a chance to go through that journey, you learn all of these things, but in the order that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught them in the seerah, in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And you get a glimpse into all of the experiences that transformed those that were the main characters of this seerah. And that is the second most beautiful benefit of studying the seerah, because when it's done correctly, we can actually feel that transformation from the moment we start to the moment we finish. We can inshallah go on that journey that by the time we finish, we know all of the things that the Sahaba knew in that final year of seerah. And we have gone through all of the transformations, inshallah, that the Sahaba went through and the Prophet ﷺ went through in that final year of seerah. So that is the second one greatest benefit of the seerah, and what makes it so unique as a field of study in the deen. The third aspect is also that when you connect with the seerah, when you learn the seerah, you get to connect with the Prophet ﷺ. You get to start to know the Prophet ﷺ, and you build your relationship and your connection with the Rasul ﷺ. You get to know him, and you almost feel like you've shared the experiences that he went through ﷺ. And the beauty of this is that not only do we love him more ﷺ, not only do we feel more of a closer relationship and a more of a closer connection with the Prophet ﷺ, but we get to feel the statement, Hayyun fi qulubina, he lives in our hearts. Because we start to feel as though the Prophet ﷺ was living amongst us and we were living amongst him, when we are truly engrossed within the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. And in addition to this, we also see that when we live the life, we go through the life of the Prophet ﷺ, I've personally experienced this, and many people that have studied the seerah have experienced this, that the seerah starts to speak to us. It starts to come alive within our life. It connects to us in a very miraculous way, in a way that it feels as though the Prophet ﷺ seerah is a solace and a friend that is besides us, that is truly living in our hearts and on our sides. That's one beautiful feeling that you get from studying the seerah intimately and by engrossing yourself within the seerah with an open mind and an open heart. And we know, as we discussed on Friday, that the Prophet ﷺ, everything he went through in his life, every single detail was for us. Everything he went through was so we would have the ultimate role model. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the Quran, Uswatun Hasana, that he is the greatest. That he is the greatest example for all of the believers to live our life upon, the course that we can set our life upon. In every aspect of life, be it in terms of our deeni life, our religious life, our spiritual life, or even our dunyawi life, in terms of our physical, material, worldly life. Every aspect, everything that we can possibly go through, the Prophet ﷺ has already left an example for us of how to go through it. And especially for all of us, when we go through times of trial and when we go through moments of sorrow and moments of difficulty, we know, like we discussed on Friday, that we go through 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, 5 or 6 different trials in this life, 5 or 6 different forms. Allah never tests any of us except on our own capability that Allah knows He's created us upon. But when it comes to the Prophet ﷺ, the strongest of all creation, the Prophet ﷺ, when he made that choice to be a Nabi al-Abd, the slave prophet, the Abd of Allah, the title that he wore with such honor, the Prophet ﷺ, with that title of the slave of Allah, he went through every possible trial, every possible sorrow, every possible experience that you could go through as a human being. Every one of them. And in that, he left a solace for us. He left something for our heart to be consoled with. He lived for us. Every moment of his life, he lived for us. His heart was beating for us, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. But yet, do our hearts beat for him, sallallahu alayhi wasallam? That great man, the greatest of men, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, every moment of his life was a solace for us, was something for us to be given hope, and for us to be given guidance, and for us to be given direction, and sometimes for our hearts to hear what we can't tell our own hearts. Sometimes we go through moments of sorrow and we go through trials and we don't know how to express our own feelings. And by Allah, you go through the seerah and you see the Prophet ﷺ has told you what you are trying to tell you, what your heart is trying to tell you. The Prophet ﷺ has put his words for you. sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you will see that when you study the seerah, you will find the miracle of the seerah. And you will find at moments you are living the seerah, that Allah has accepted you to live the seerah. And at other times, you will see that the seerah is going through what you're going through. The seerah is explaining what you're going through. It's as though whatever is happening in your life is being discussed in the seerah. Wallahi, you will see these things in the beautiful life of the Prophet ﷺ that lives within all of us. And that is a life, a seerah, that lives on and on and on and will always go on. That is why we say Hayyun fi qulubina. He lives within us. He lives in our hearts. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It is not upon us just to read the seerah, but to revive the seerah within our hearts. That is the third greatest benefit of the seerah. And the fourth benefit of the seerah is that amongst the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, all of the characters, all of the blessed Sahaba that was surrounded the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and even those wretched ones that surrounded the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they became characters for us to take in as normal human beings who aren't Anbiya, who aren't prophets, for us to say, how do we connect? What do we do and what do we not do? Who do we become like and who do we don't become like? That ultimate form for us as normal human beings. What don't we do? What path don't we go down? So that we don't become like the Abu Jahls. What path do we take? What do we do so we become like the Abu Bakrs, radiallahu anh? Those characters are there, and by Allah, in the seerah there is one character that every one of us will connect to. You'll either find a connection that, you know what, I find myself in Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, I find myself in Umar radiallahu anhu, I find myself in Sayyidina Uthman, Sayyidina Ali, Sayyidina Abu Ubayd al-Jarrah, Sayyidina Talha, Sayyidina Ubay, all of the Sahaba that you see, from the women, Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu anha, Sayyidina Khadija radiallahu anha, all of the Sahabiyat, all of the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, their daughters, and all of the female companions, you will find yourself in one of these, radiallahu anhum ajma'in. And you will see how to, through them, how to become connected to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who will connect you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our ultimate goal, the purpose of our creation. That is the fourth greatest beautiful benefit of the seerah, that you can connect to those who connect you to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You can connect to the deen that was brought by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You can live through his life, and ultimately you can know him to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the blessings and the purpose of why we study the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And by Allah, not only do we need to know him, but the world needs to know him. The world is dying. The world is at its knees. And wallahi, the world needs Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The world needs our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because when we get to just the beginning of the seerah, we'll see that when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam entered this world, the world was on its knees. And the world was changed forever. The world was shook for the better. The world was revived from its darkness by the entrance and the emergence of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we need to bring that emergence back. We need to revive that. We need to give life to that seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in every step that we take in our lives. We need to let the world know the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are people who are depicting a false image of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from disgusting images that they've seen from us, from misrepresentations of Islam and misrepresentations of the pure Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his sunnah mutahhara that they've seen, unfortunately, from us. Those disgusting images that they've seen from us, they need to be removed, and we need to show them the true light, the true beauty that is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is the reason why we need to study the seerah, because unfortunately we ourselves as Muslims, those who claim to love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, those who claim to follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we don't know his life. We don't know his seerah. Many of us can give more facts and more spoilers about the stories of movies or the lives of celebrities or historical figures than we can of our own beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, than we can of the greatest of stories. The story that Allah chose to be the pinnacle point, the climactic event of the story of the world. The story of the entire life of this world, from the beginning till the day of Qiyamah, the climactic moment, the most important pinnacle point was the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we unfortunately can't retell that story, but we can tell the stories of books. We can tell the stories of Harry Potter. We can go from 1 till 7 till 8. We can say each character. We know the characters. We know their names. We know their backgrounds. We know their bios. But we can't do the same for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for his life, for the years of his seerah. What happened in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6? What happened in the Meccan period? What happened in the Medinan period? What happened to the Sahaba? Who were the characters that surrounded the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What were their bios? We don't know these things. And that is why the Ummah is at such a weak state, because everything that we're going through, we would know how to challenge if we knew the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and those that surrounded the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is the reason and why it's absolutely adamant and extremely important that we study the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. With that, inshallah, I'd like to begin entering into the seerah and just quickly mention that as much as we hope we could do justice to the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, no one can truly do justice to that great tale. The only one who can do justice to that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that brought it in the greatest of justice in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when it manifested upon this world. But we hope that we can try and do whatever we can in these short moments, because in the desperation that we have, in the thirst that we have, in the starvation that we have in order to know Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, anything is a benefit for us. Anything will give us some form of satiation, inshallah. And to mention that no matter how much we try, we can't truly give justice to the seerah. We can't really truly go enough in detail into the seerah. And to give an example, my teacher who we study the seerah of, my teacher taught us the seerah. We may have half an hour, 40 minutes in these sessions. My teacher would teach us the seerah from 45 minutes to an hour for over 10 years. 10 years, 45 minutes to an hour, constantly going through the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when he finished, he told us that we didn't go even touch the surface. We didn't do justice to the seerah. With us, we have 29, 28, 27 days, whatever remains of Ramadan, and we have about 30 minutes in those days. So we will be touching the surface of touching the surface, and maybe even less than that when it comes to the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because this is a 23-year saga, a 23-year epic journey that is like no other. And if you had 23 years to go through it, it still wouldn't be enough, because we have to describe what was lived in 1 second. It might take us 10 minutes to describe the scene and the setting and what happened, who was there, what happened before, what happened after. So for us, in reality, we aren't even touching the surface of the seerah. And we hope that inshallah this can become a starting point for us to go and study the real books of the seerah, to go and listen to the real ulama, the real scholars who will go through the in-depth life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that every one of us needs. Because through that we will know our deen, we will know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we will know ourselves who we truly are. That is the hopefully the intention behind studying the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In terms of the format, inshallah, we hope to have between 30 to 40 minutes daily between weekdays 4 to 5 p.m. on these shows. 30 to 40 minutes of studying the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which we will go through the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in order as the form of a narrative, as we mentioned on Friday. We won't be discussing the seerah in terms of the technicalities of hadith or the differences of opinion that exist. As we know, this story is related to us through those who were there, through the eyewitnesses, through the accounts of the Sahaba and the Imams of seerah, the scholars who took all of the painstakingly went through all of the different narrations that came from different angles, from different chains of narration, from different eyewitnesses, different perspectives, different angles of the same incident, and took all of them and unified them into one consolidated story that was the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah have mercy upon those beautiful souls that Allah accepted to compile the greatest of stories, the most beloved of stories, the stories in the life of his beloved Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Through their efforts, we have this beautiful story, but there are differences of opinion. As you can imagine, each person can give his story in his own perspective. They might miss certain things out that someone else might add, and someone else might add what they miss out, and vice versa. And sometimes we might give, each person can narrate a story in his own way, in their own perspective, according to their own understanding. So there are different understandings of the same incident. There are different shades to the same incident. And there are different angles and perspectives and different opinions, different narrations of the same incident. But for us here, inshallah, with the limited time that we have, we hope and we intend that we can just go through the overall narrative, the overall overarch of the story and that incident that took place in the order that we know best. Sometimes even the order can shift, that even the timings can have different opinions, but we will try wherever we can to go through what is the majority opinion, inshallah, what is the most authentic opinion, inshallah, and continue as an overall narrative, so we can take the key messages and the essence of that incident over the technicalities of that incident, inshallah ta'ala. In terms of the sources of the seerah that we use, for myself, I have, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed upon me this huge ni'mah, this huge favor that I can never ever repay, even if I was to make shukr my entire life, that I have had the benefit of and the blessing of studying the seerah from a very young age, firstly beginning from my father, my beloved father, who had started telling me with whatever he knew. He wasn't a scholar, he hadn't memorized the Quran, he hadn't studied the hadith, he hadn't studied the tafsir, but one thing that I learned from him from the youngest of age was this unmatched and undying love of the Prophet ﷺ that he instilled within all of our family and within all of us. And whenever he could give us any ilm, it would always be through the medium of the seerah, through the stories of the Prophet ﷺ. And many of these stories that my father told me were the first connection, the first seerah that I had heard of the Prophet ﷺ. And you will hear some of these stories that they come in the very beginning, the very early periods of the seerah. These were the stories that I heard from my father, after which I was blessed with my teachers, Mufti Shamim Ahmad and Maulana Shari Yazuddin, Mufti Ikram Muqsab, and many others who had inspired me and who had taught me the seerah. And through their teachings, we inshallah we will be going through the various books that were covered, including the likes of Ar-Rahiq al-Maktoum, the Seal Nectar by Sheikh Saifur Rahman Mubarakpuri, and the Seerah al-Mustafa primarily by Maulana Idris Rahmatullah alayh, which is a beautiful, beautiful work and one of the best works of Seerah there is in the English language in the world today. And I urge everyone to get a copy of this. It is printed in various bookshops around the world. Seerah al-Mustafa by Sheikh Maulana Idris Rahmatullah alayh. Also Nashr al-Tib fi Dhikr al-Nabi al-Habib by Maulana Shaf Ali Tanwi Sahab Rahmatullah alayh. And likewise the various ahadith from the various collections of hadith and the notes from my teachers who are also studying and teaching these books even now, continuing every day. And I am inshallah taking the notes that my teachers have given me and passing them on to all who are viewing here, inshallah, to benefit. And we hope that through these sources, inshallah, we can form a narrative of the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as was taught to me by my teachers, so that we can connect to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we can try and feel the love that they feel when they study and when they teach the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Inshallah, without further ado, I hope that inshallah with this we can begin and we can enter into the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Before we begin, as it will be the custom of every day, I urge all of the viewers to first recite Durood Sharif, salawat upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. So before we begin, inshallah, as we know that every story, any story, whenever you begin, the first thing you need to know is the setting of the story, the time of the story. Where does this story start? Where is it set? In terms of the location and in terms of the timing. And as we mentioned, we will not be going into the seerah in the detail that is required. But in reality, the story of the seerah doesn't start in Makkah. It doesn't start at the time of the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It doesn't start a year before. It actually starts from the beginning of creation, from time immemorial. Because we know from the narrations that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the most beloved and the most greatest of creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam was created even before Adam alayhi salam, even before the Anbiya, even before the heavens and earth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created his beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this story really starts from then onwards, and it continues until Adam alayhi salam and Hawa alayhi salam set foot upon this earth. And when they were making their dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive them and reunite them, and when they remember that beautiful name that they saw on the arsh of Allah, Muhammad, and they say, Ya Allah, as'alu bihaqqi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that I ask you by the right of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And Allah introduces the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam to Adam alayhi salam, saying, Walawla Muhammadun ma khalaqtuka. If it wasn't for Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, I wouldn't have even created you, or Adam, as it comes in the riwayah of Bayhaqi. And the story continues as each prophet came and they were told, and they were marveling at the creation of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they took what they had been informed by Allah through the angels, and they would go and inform their nations and mention it in their scriptures about the coming of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as each prophet came and served as a build-up and a build-up and a build-up, as a chapter building up towards the pinnacle of creation, towards the pinnacle point in the history of mankind, in the history of the earth, the moment that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would enter into this world, which is the moment that we will start our seerah from, inshallah. And this is the moment, this is the year in which we are set in Makkah al-Mukarramah, the glorious city and town that was established by Ibrahim alayhi salam, the great grandfather of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And as we know, Ibrahim alayhi salam had two sons, Ismail alayhi salam and Ishaq alayhi salam. And as we mentioned, each prophet was told about this great being, the greatest of creation, the most beloved of Allah, the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who would enter into this world. And each prophet wished that they could give up all of the blessings that Allah had given them, all of the honorific titles that Allah had given them, all of the maqam and the ranks that Allah had given them, to become not a prophet, not a king, not anything, but a follower, an ummati of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, something that we have been born with by default without even asking. Say alhamdulillah for that ultimate blessing. And as you know, each prophet asked this dua, but they weren't given that. But Ibrahim alayhi salam was the clever one, that rather than asking, he knew he couldn't be from Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he asked if Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam could be from him. So we know that from the two sons of Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ishaq alayhi salam had become the father of all of the prophets of Bani Israel, from Yaqub alayhi salam to Yusuf alayhi salam, going through Musa alayhi salam, all of them came through Bani Israel. Israel being another name of Yaqub alayhi salam, who was from the descendants of Ishaq alayhi salam, the son of Ibrahim alayhi salam. When it comes to Ismail alayhi salam, the other son, Ismail alayhi salam was the one who inhabited the barren land of Makkah, which became Makkah, the blessed city of Makkah, the blessed Makkah that we know. It started off from what was a barren land, from the efforts of Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam, who together built the Kaaba, the house of Allah. And that town, that city, with the Safa and Marwa, the Kaaba, the Hajr Aswad, the blessed stone from Jannah, and the well of Zamzam, these blessings were all formed in this beautiful open town, inhabited and founded by Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam. And thereafter, from the lineage of Ismail alayhi salam, you're going to see that lineage goes down all the way till we reach this moment in Makkah, when we have Abdullah, who is the father of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the son of Abdul Muttalib, who is the grandfather of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the leader of the entire city of Makkah, in the year 570 BC. This is the year that we're setting and the time that we're starting our seerah upon. And in the town, in the location of Makkah, that was established by the great grandfather of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam. Because as we know, as we mentioned on Friday, the lineage of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the son of Abdullah, whose lifetime we are starting in upon. Abdullah bin Abdul Muttalib bin Hashim bin Abd Manaf bin Qusay bin Kilab bin Murrah bin Ka'b bin Luway bin Ghalib bin Fihr bin Malik bin Nadr bin Kinana bin Khuzaymah bin Mudrika bin Ilyas bin Mudr bin Nazar bin Ma'ad bin Adnan. And from here we know that the narrations, as it comes in the riwayah of Bukhari Sharif, this is the genealogy, the lineage of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from his father's side. And from Adnan till Ismail, there is a difference of opinion. Qadab al-Nasabun, the genealogists have erred between this period between Adnan and Ismail alayhi salam. One opinion says it's Ud, so it'd be Adnan bin Ud bin Ismail. Some have multiple names or multiple generations between this, but what we know conclusively is till Adnan, and in between that gap till Ismail. This is the lineage of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam from his father's side, and likewise from his mother's side, also very similar with only a few names different. This is the blessed lineage of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this, at this moment, when Abdullah, the father of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is a young boy in the streets of Makkah, the son of Abdul Muttalib, this is where our story begins, and this is where our story sets out. Abdullah radiallahu anhu, the father of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was from the youngest sons of Abdul Muttalib, who was the grandfather of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And as well as being the grandfather of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was also the leader of the entire city of Makkah, of the tribe of Quraysh, which was the tribe of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Quraysh were like the royal family, if you will, the aristocratic family. They were like the kings and the queens of Makkah. And Abdul Muttalib was the leader. You could say he was like the king of Makkah. He was like the leader of Makkah. And from within this king, this leader of this royal aristocratic family of Quraysh, he has his sons, from Abu Talib to Abu Lahab to Al-Abbas to Hamza, Abdullah. These are the different sons of Abdul Muttalib. Some who have been born already and some who are yet to be born. But from at the moment, his youngest son is going to be Abdullah radiallahu anhu, the father of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Abdullah, the father of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was the youngest, and he is the one who is different to all of his other brothers. He's the one that isn't really enjoying the status of his father. He isn't the one that is always dressed up. The other brothers, they were dressed up in the finest of clothes. They would go and they would sit outside the canopy of their father Abdul Muttalib, because this is a scenario, this is a scene where Makkah isn't as we know Makkah. We have to first, before we enter into Makkah, we have to know what Makkah was at that time. Makkah at this moment in time is a center where an open desert barren land filled with mountains, a very mountainous region, and a place that amongst all of these mountains, when you get towards the central location, you're going to have a bit of a dip, a bit of an open expanse with little houses, small huts, and some bigger houses, stone-built houses. And all of these houses are in almost like an encircling mode. And in the center of all of these circling houses, you have the Kaaba, the house of Allah, as we see today. And that Kaaba, around that Kaaba, the scene that you're going to see is also very different, very vast from what you see today. You had the Kaaba, and outside of the Kaaba, you had 360 idols, different idols that had been cemented and fixed around the center that would become the Masjid al-Haram, the sanctified location, if you will. The Masjid al-Haram, the precincts of the Haram, this circle, if you will, this land was surrounded by idols all the way around, and the Kaaba in the center. And just at the outskirts of the Kaaba, you had something called as the Darul Nadwa Council. This was like the House of Commons. They didn't have a big Ben, but it was like the House of Commons, their kind of meeting place, the meeting place of the Quraysh. So you have the Kaaba, the 360 idols that had surrounded the Kaaba, the Darul Nadwa, their House of Commons, their council, their meeting room for the Quraysh, and around that you had all of the different houses of the people, rich and poor, and then the mountainous regions that were surrounding this desert land known as Makkah. And this was the area of Makkah. Now, within this Darul Nadwa Council that was outside of the Kaaba, you had a different setting that was set for the leaders of Makkah. You had, just outside of the Kaaba, you had a special couch, a special throne type of couch, if you will, that was set for the leader of Makkah, which was used by Abdul Muttalib. This was where Abdul Muttalib would sit, and this would be his kind of cushion or his special seat that was established for him. And around that area, the nobles of Quraysh, the leaders of Quraysh, the Ashraf, they would sit there. This was like their main kind of high, lofty position that they would sit on. And no one would dare sit in these positions. Or no one would, even from them, even those who were honored to sit in these positions, no one would dare sit on this cushion that was the cushion of Abdul Muttalib. So this is, you've got the Kaaba, you've got the special seating positions, you've got the Darul Nadwa Council, and you've got these 360 idols that have surrounded Makkah. This was the physical description of Makkah. But in terms of the atmosphere, how Makkah was, Makkah had become a place that it was not only far vast from what it is now, but it was vastly different to what Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam had established it. When they established it, it was a pure city that only had the one house of Allah, that called to the one Allah, that called to the one religion, the Deen, the pure justice of Allah. He had the pure well of Zamzam. He had the pure stone of Hajar Aswad. And he had the pure Safa Marwa mountains. And he was free from even people, if you will. He just had the purest of souls. Ismail alayhi salam and his father Ibrahim alayhi salam and his wife Hajra alayhi salam. Now from this, Makkah, now in the setting we're in, becomes a town that, in as well as being physically surrounded by loads of houses that weren't there at the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, a Hajar Aswad that has now turned black because of the sins of people, a Zamzam that had been lost and now found again, a Safa Marwa that has been tainted, and a blessed precinct, a Masjid al-Haram that has been surrounded by 360 idols in the place that was supposed to be the place of Hanif. And the Ibrahim alayhi salam is called in the Quran Hanif, and absolutely pure for Allah. That place has now been surrounded by shirk and idolatry. And this was a place where, as we know, these idols, they had been formed in such a fashion that when the leaders, the people of Quraysh, when they had started to pass away, Iblis and the shaitan had come to these people, and using the emotion, using the memory of and the pain of these great leaders and these people that had passed away, Iblis had made these people say, you know, your leader, your grandfather, your father who's just passed away, you're missing him. Why don't you form an image of him? So they would form an image or a statue out of clay or whatever materials that they could find of their beloved person. And then this started off as a statue, as a memorial for their beloved one who had passed away, or their leader, or a respected person of the community. And over time, that statue, that form started to be replicated, started to be duplicated, shared amongst houses, until that image was then distorted to become something that was no longer the memory of a person, but that person was then remembered through the form of the statue as a deity, as a god, as someone who's divine, na'udhu billah. And that's how the form of this idolatry started to develop in Makkah. And these idols slowly started to make their way through the whispers of shaitan into the haram itself. And as it comes in the narrations, that shaitan himself, Iblis himself, helped them form and fix these idols inside the ground of the haram with steel and iron, making sure that they were absolutely firmly cemented, never to be removed, in such a way that no one could break them. They couldn't be shook. They were, there to stay permanently inside this pure haram, in the ground of the haram. The Kaaba, the tawaf that we do on those grounds, on every step almost that where we are performing tawaf. And as it comes in some narrations, there is not of one handspan or 1 foot space in the haram, except that there is a Nabi buried there. We know from the narrations that there were only over 224,000 Anbiya that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had set across the course of this earth. And from all of those prophets, many of those are buried within the precincts of the haram, in that land, in that blessed land. Iblis is making these people with and supporting them with his own hands to cement with iron and steel these statues that started off as memorials, who have now become not just memories of people, but a distorted memory of someone who now they are saying was a divine god, na'udhu billah. And that's how Lat, Manat, Uzza, Hubal, I feel disgusted knowing these names, but these are names that are even mentioned in the Quran for us to be deterred from. These are names of the people who had passed on, who had now become remembered as gods, na'udhu billah, and as idols. And these idols served as a connection, as a form of proxy to connect to these astaghfirullah, divine individuals who they could call upon and they could ask for help. And the leaders of the Quraysh had then seen that power comes through those who take it, whether they take it in a wrong way or a good way. When those people had taken that power, they had taken it in an incorrect way. They had taken their power and started to abuse it. So now the Quraysh, the leaders of Quraysh, had taken their position, had taken their wealth, and started to take their power and their rule to have a monopoly over the entire Makkah, to create this atmosphere where the Kaaba, the Haram, the idols that surround it, the houses, and everything all the way to the outskirts and the borders of Makkah was under their control. The way Makkah looked, the way Makkah thought, and the way Makkah was, the tiers within Makkah society was all under their hands, all under their control. And they had created such an atmosphere that when people who had walked into the precincts of the Haram, it became less of a pure center to worship Allah and remember Allah, but more of a business, more of a place where people were exploited, because they not only controlled the physical positioning and the physical look of Makkah, but also the atmosphere and the thoughts and the beliefs. They had created an atmosphere where Makkah was in ranks. Everyone had to be fitting into a certain rank, and human beings were lower and lower and lower, or higher and higher, based on what they determined. People had been fitted into these roles that they couldn't come out of, and they couldn't choose. They couldn't do anything about the way they were in. They had very little choice. These leaders had chosen where they fit in and how they fit in and what role they serve in life. They almost played a monopoly where they choose the purpose of their life based on what they felt, based on criteria such as what they liked, skin color, or your lineage, or where you're from, or what town you're from, or how you were born, or how rich you are, or where you live. All of these things were factors. What gender you are, what your father did, what his profession was. They took all of these things, and rather than seeing them as an identity, they took them as a form of racial class, or a form of determining what you get to do in life and what restrictions you have in life, according to their law, not on the law of Allah. And they started to feel, that they could choose the taqdeer and the destiny of people. They could choose the beliefs of people. They had made certain people believe that if they fit into a certain rank, then they aren't even human. They had, the leaders, the richest of the rich. And then they had those who were rich but normal human beings. And then they had those who were weak and downtrodden human beings. And then they had those who they had a criterion line. Anything below that, you weren't even a human being. You were a slave or a commodity or an item, or equal to an animal, or equal to an item like a vase or a wall or a door, or an item that I use and buy and sell. That's the kind of criterion that they had set and made people believe that if you were from a certain criterion, you were born to be that. So if someone was a slave, they were born and they were made to believe that I am as worthless as a commodity. I am something that is bought and sold. I am not a human being. This is the amount of oppression that they had brought upon. They had made the people who are poor, go into such a lifestyle that they could only become poor. They couldn't become rich, and the rich could only become richer. So the rich would always be in their position. Their position was sanctified and protected, and the poor had no option of empowerment. They had thwarted any motives of empowerment. This is the kind of oppression that was set upon the people of Makkah. They had actually even turned the Haram, like we said, into a business center. When people had come, they weren't told that they could come and pray to Allah. They weren't told that they could come and do tawaf of the Kaaba. They had to come and they had to give some kind of monetary sacrifice or offering. So they had to go to one of these idols, who now in this setting of Makkah, you've got 360, 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 10 to 20. We've got 360 go. So, catering for the demand that people would come, go to the idols and either give a monetary sacrifice, or they would have to give some kind of food and give it as a sacrifice to this piece of stone and hope that their sacrifice would be accepted. And what would this mean? You have a person who is poor, or you have a mother who is so poor she has barely enough food and barely enough money to sustain herself, and her child is sick, and this mother is crying, seeing her child in a state about to die, and she doesn't have anything. So she goes hoping to pray to Allah. And what is she told? That she can only enter into the haram if she goes and gives some kind of money to sacrifice to one of these idols. So she goes to her home and sees she has nothing. She has no coins, no money. She has maybe one, a few set of dates, or maybe a piece of fruit that's almost, not even in its peak condition, that maybe it's about to rot, but that's the only piece of food that she has. And rather than feeding herself and her children, she starves and takes that piece of fruit and goes to this idol and says, I give you this piece of rotten fruit. It's all I have as a sacrifice. Please accept this sacrifice. Please cure my son. Please cure my child. We have to come with 2 hands full and give you this. And then they would perform tawaf and leave. This is how they were forced. And what would happen? A stone can't consume fruit. A stone can't consume anything. As Ibrahim a.s. said to his people, this stone, this idol can't benefit itself. It can't protect itself. How is it going to benefit you? How is it going to protect you? So when they would go away, these leaders, they would then collect all of this wealth, and the good that they wanted to take, they would hoard for themselves. It was money for themselves. And the bad that they didn't want, this fruit is rotten, they could throw it on the ground. The next day, the person comes, and with tears, they have to believe in their minds that my sacrifice wasn't accepted, it wasn't good enough. This is the kind of zulm and oppression. And that child is still ill, that mother is still starving, and she has to now find something else, something better to give as a sacrifice to the gods. Na'udhu billah. This was the oppression and the belief system that had been, the atmosphere that was built in Makkah, the power struggle, the monopoly that was built in Makkah. And look at the beauty. Look at how the believer comes to Allah. The believer comes to his Lord. When we make dua, how do we come? With 2 empty hands. Nothing to give, but everything to take. As a fakir in front of their Lord. As Musa says, Rabbi inni lima anzalta ilayya min khayrin fakir. My Lord, I am in need of any good that you give me. Anything. Hands open, I'll take it. I got 2 empty hands with nothing to give you. Oh Allah, Al-Ghani, who is the most richest and enriched of everything. Please give me something. I come with 2 empty hands to you. Please accept my dua. That's how we cry at the Kaaba. That's how we cry to our Lord. With nothing to give and everything to take, with 2 empty hands. And when we do give a sacrifice, when we do give sadaqah, who do we give it to? We give it to a fellow human beings. We give it to the creation of Allah, so that the poor can benefit. Not so that the poor have to give and for their sacrifice to be thrown on the ground. That is the beauty of coming to the one Almighty Allah, who is just gives and gives and has nothing to take from us, and we have nothing to give him. That is our Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this was the atmosphere that was set in the center that Allah was supposed to be remembered. This was the evil and the oppression that had crept into Makkah. I am conscious of time. I know we have almost gone over the time. So inshallah, with this atmosphere of Makkah, we will continue tomorrow with the blessed Seerah and the beautiful Seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and how our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam enters into this atmosphere and this scene of Makkah, this tainted city that was once the pure city of his great grandfather Ibrahim alayhi salam. We hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us all the tawfiq to act upon what has been said and what has been heard in this beautiful seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And may Allah forgive me for my shortcomings and my mistakes and my errors and my stutters and my inability to deliver what is the greatest of stories, and the greatest of lives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, written by the greatest of writers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the writer of all taqdeers and of all lives and of all seerahs. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Jazakallahu khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.